First, let's talk about your set on Saturday. Will that be the entire last album? Will you do a mixture? Will you do?
Yeah, so this weekend was supposed to be an accompanied set with one of my biggest collaborators is Ryan Honecker. We have a band called Ionophore, and when sometimes for the bigger performances, I have him accompany me on violin and soundscapes and live loop captures, that kind of thing. He's an excellent producer, so it's always great to have him join me. But sadly, he had to cancel due to some work commitments, so it will be an actual solo set, and it will be focusing heavily on Phantasiai material, but I will have at least a track from each of the previous three albums as well, and some improv as well.
Well, do you get nervous not doing it with him? Is it maybe make you, I guess, improv a little more?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely more open to, I can kind of take it, I can change things up last minute on the spot, which is pretty great. But, and I've done solo sets before, at smaller venues, but for a venue of this size and it's a metal show, I feel like, it's always nice to be bigger and louder for those kind of events, but I'm really going to have to step it up with just me and try to fill the space as much as possible. So I have little things in mind to do that, and we'll see if they actually work.
And will you be playing multiple instruments?
Yeah, so my set's mostly trumpet and voice, and I have a little MIDI controller for playing synth patches and things like that. I also use a temple bell, and I get all kinds of great overtones from that. And I can change the pitches and make it sound like a bunch of different things. And I do a lot of live looping just to make it sound bigger and more interesting and more dynamic. So there'll be a lot of that.
In a festival setting, is it hard for ambient music to make more of an impact? Because it seems like the sound has more places to go, as opposed to like when you're in an intimate club and it just kind of stays there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And it's a challenge. But the challenge isn't so much the room as much as the audience. So, I mean, I've played festivals that are, these sort of dark wave, ambient, electronic type festivals. I find the audiences to be a lot more sort of, they'll shut up and listen. I think metal shows are challenging because if something doesn't sound loud, people are just going to talk over the set and not realize there's actually someone performing. So that's my challenge with this weekend, and we'll see how well that happens. A lot of it is just making sure that the sound person really turns the volume up loud in the house, and then that would at least blank out any extraneous sound or to distract me and keep me nice and focused. So hoping for the best.
When you put a set list together for something like this, do you come out with something loud and wild? Do you slowly build up to it?
Yeah, it's I mean, it's like loud is a relative term, right? I mean,
Right,
there's no distortion, there's no
right,
guitars, there's no drum set. So things only get so loud, but yeah, I definitely like to build the layers slowly
right,
and
right.
gradually, and make it dynamic all throughout, like have all of a sudden a quiet moment and then come in with I use a lot of field recordings, so sometimes
Yeah,
I loop those in and there'll be like just a swarm of insects,
right.
that kind of thing. And I try to like make use of like the three-dimensional space, so I do a lot of panning so it sounds like the sound is traveling in the room.
And with a festival, can you maybe your first song kind of get a vibe that the audience is picking it up and they're into it? Or do you maybe have to work a little harder to keep them focused?
Well, I also use visuals as another tool to,
Right.
maintain interest and also have something to reflect on while you're getting immersed in all this sound, because it's a lot of it's very abstract um, and textural. So it's nice to have a visual to combine with that. So it's a whole experience.
The album's been out for a year. Are you happy with the response?
Um, yes and no. I think the fact that the vinyl took so long to
Right.
come out after the initial release was it felt a little anticlimactic. So it's like a year later, it's like, okay, my album's now available, but you've been listening to it for the past year. So it just,
Right.
so that was a little disappointing. But I think the response has been strong otherwise in terms of just the feedback from people who've actually listened and the reviews and whatnot.
And actual music yourself, it's your fourth solo album. When you decide to do a project of ambient music, are these ideas you've had around for a while that you just keep working on? Or is this like you just put the whole thing together at one point over 6 months, let's say?
A little more of the latter. I would say that I'm not the type of person to just have a bunch of pieces lying around for years and then
Right.
get to them and be like, all right, now I'm going to make an album out of this. I kind of use everything I do for something. Also because I collaborate with a lot of people. So if something doesn't work for one thing, I can always use it for another thing.
Right.
And but usually once I start a new solo record, I'll have a song or two or three that I start with, and then the rest comes together pretty quickly. And it's a very intuitive process. So once I have the foundation of like two or three tracks, it's a pretty quick. In fact, it doesn't even take 6 months. It takes more like three, and then the whole production process takes longer than that.
Right.
The
Right.
artwork, the layout, the mastering, all of that um, takes longer than actually writing and recording the thing. So,
And when you're doing the actual layering for a song of effects and stuff, is that to maybe push the sound in a specific direction, or is that just something you think works for that particular spot in the song?
well, it works for the particular songs, but it's also just like the effects that I use, I think of as like an actual instrument. It's not like I'm trying to make a statement at this particular section of the song. When I use reverb, there's reverb over the whole thing generally, but it's also another instrument. Like I can create all these great overtones. So it's actually adding to the composition as its own thing. It's not just I'm not trying to hide anything or some people they
Right.
use reverb as a way to sort of mask any mistakes or
Right.
stuff like that, and it's not like that for me. I kind of mix as I go, so I'll record something and I'll add the reverb in, and that'll give me another idea. That'll spawn another melody or a different kind of instrument that I hadn't planned on doing to begin with. It's a very nonlinear process. It's all the mixing and the effects. It spawns so many other additional elements that are spontaneous. So I can go back and then, or I peel away a layer and I add it back somewhere else.
And you're involved in the whole mixing process and everything.
Oh, I produce everything.
For you as an artist, when do you know when a track is done?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I've answered that quite a bit. And I think I've answered it a lot in other interviews. It seems to be the question that fascinates people because sometimes you just don't, and you just have to believe in yourself that it is done. For me, I'm not done until I can listen back to the finished product and feel in my body a sense of satisfaction, and I'm not cringing or wincing at a certain part.
Right.
If I get to a certain point in the song and I get uncomfortable or unhappy, then I know I'm not done. So and I keep working and working till those feelings go away, and I'm like, yes, this is, or it gives me goosebumps, the whole thing, all the way through. That's another. So it's like a feeling in the body for the most part.
And is it difficult for you to do the endings of songs where you got to figure out whether it's going to fade down or it's going to stop or it's going to?
Yeah, that's a big part of the process, is the transitions between the tracks. And because I write in a way where I have just a couple of songs to start with, they could be really different. One could be just piano, the other could be like just glockenspiel and voice, the other could be like just trumpet and synth or something. And then my job is to figure out how to bridge
Right.
those, really very different pieces. And so that's part of the writing. It's like the writing, filling in the gaps and making the transitions, is writing the album. So I'm have all that in mind so that when you listen to it, and then coming up with the order is a whole other thing. And you want to listen to it and feel like it's an unbroken journey that's evolving, and it's drawing you in and then spitting you out again. That's sort of the feeling that I want to create over the, 40 plus minutes or whatever.
And with this album, how do I say this? Was this written with the visual idea in your head? Because it seems like all of it's very visual.
Yeah, this one was different because I had the visual in mind before any of the music. And I've never written that way before, where I had an image in mind and thought, well, what does an album with this image sound like? Now it's my job to write that.
Right?
And it was really interesting experience to have that. And I had the name even before the music as well, which is something that never happens. Usually I have the title after I've stepped back and I know what the song titles are and there might be a theme. But no, I started with the theme and the cover and then filled the music in.
And do you have a specific instrument you like to do your writing process on? Some people use piano, some people use acoustic guitar.
Piano's a big one for me. That's a really good starting point. And using and textures, like or any of my field recordings, like I'll listen to a nighttime recording of frogs, and I'll hear melodies there.
Yeah.
And so I'll just loop it back to myself and I'll start thinking of vocal melodies and I'll just start improvising over it. And the improvisation, the writing and the improvisation is part of the recording process. So I'm recording everything and then I'm just refining, refining, refining with that spontaneous session, in that spontaneous session. So I don't like to overthink it. It's like, because I don't, sometimes when I record something and I do a do-over, I don't capture the same feeling that I had the
Right, right.
first time around. Yeah.
And you as an artist, is it easier, harder to do lyrics as opposed to doing strictly ambient music?
Well,
You know,
it's always lyrical. Like, so I try to always have a balance. I don't like to hear my voice on every single song. I like to give people a break and come back to it and have them miss it a little bit. So when it comes back,
right.
it's a welcome sound. And then a lot of the times my lyrics are very stream of consciousness, or I'll wake up from a dream and I'll scribble some phrases down. Or sometimes I'll just make it up on the spot. And I do that live too. I'll just have a melody that I start singing, and then words will just come into my mind on stage, and that's been fun. It's I never know what it's going to be.
And within the actual recording process, you lay down the music first and then try and squeeze the lyrics over it. You have the lyric, then you try and put the music around it.
Yeah, I'd say it mostly happens that way, but sometimes I'll just have a really like a single synth track or something very simple, and I do the voice over that, and I'll keep adding even after I'm done layering the voice. And sometimes the voice is textural only, and I would start with that and then add the instruments after that. But generally, yeah, I would say the lyrics will happen as, after I have some instrumentation laid down.
It, are you still a solo artist now, or are you back with the band? Is it
Oh, I've been both and both for over 10 years now. So they're parallel projects.
a preference to either one? It doesn't matter.
Oh no, they're all important to me. They're all a part of me, and they all express different aspects of my creativity that I wouldn't be able to with just one project. So I gotta have my death metal. I gotta have my, dark wave, electronic drum and bass thing. Have to have my ambient thing. So yeah, it's all a part of me, and it's all concurrent.
And have you done a song, a track where you maybe even feel like okay, and then you do it live and it goes over great?
Goes over great.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, that's actually when I'm preparing a set from scratch. It can be really challenging with a new album because when I record, I'm not necessarily thinking about um, I'm thinking about it more now than I used to, but I used to just never think about it. I would just throw paint at the wall,
right,
get it to sound really good on record without really thinking, well, how am I going to do this live? And then I get to the point, well, how am I going to do this live?
right,
I have all these layers and it's just me. So I pick the songs that I think would work the best, and it's usually the ones that end up being more stripped down and simple and have a very clear vocal melody or a very clear trumpet line that would work with just maybe a backing track and another loop. And those tend to be the most successful tracks. And then I usually keep those in my repertoire, but I always have to keep adding. So I have to start that process all over again. But I've been getting better at it. I've been playing live now for 8 years, and I'm doing the solo project for about 13. So, or what am I talking about? 11 years, something like that. Little over 10 years, but still,
right.
I didn't think I was ever going to make it a live thing. And then my ex-partner convinced me to do it, and I was really glad that they encouraged me to, because it would never have happened, or it wouldn't have happened till much, much later. So I got to really develop this foundation doing all these shows, and now when I do write, I do think about, well, let's think about how we're going to do this live, because I'm going to end up having to do it live at some point.
At this point, as an artist, do you prefer the live show versus the studio?
Absolutely not. Um, for they're different animals, and obviously for an ambient project, the studio is like
Right,
your
right,
your sandbox to just have fun, and you can make the impossible possible in the studio. And then live, you have to think about, well, how am I going to make this interesting for the audience? And that's a whole other dimension of production. It's not the same
right,
thing, and I don't want to make them the same thing. I don't want to replicate the record live. I think as an ambient artist, I think that's really boring. It feels like I'm doing karaoke if I'm just replicating the
right.
same thing and I'm just singing over it. A lot of artists do that. That works for them. Doesn't really work for me, but I like to have something new that the audience hasn't heard before, that I haven't heard before because it's improvised, and just surprise everybody and have a different visual every time so they're not looking at the same thing, and make it really work for the room. And sometimes, for a small space, you have to have a different set than for a bigger room. So, yeah. Whereas with a metal band, it's like people want the same, they know all the lyrics, they want to
Right.
rock out, they want it to sound like the record. So I think, Vastum, my death metal band, is very much like, let's play things as they are. Let's play the solos the same way. People want to like hum the solos in their head and
Right.
they know the lyrics. So it works for that.
You mentioned you loved your death metal earlier. Are there any other genres in music you maybe want to try and experiment with or try people might not expect to hear from you?
I don't know. I've done so much. I've done, prog rock and black metal and thrash metal, and I had a post-punk band that was very short-lived. So I would love to do more of the post-punk death rock dark wave thing. Like if I were to maybe fit something else in, it would probably be something along those lines, just because that project ended so prematurely that um, I shouldn't say it ended because we might resurrect it in the future, but like post-punk is such a big part of my it was such a big part of my youth, like what I listened to,
Right,
that it's so in my blood to just write, guitar lines like The
right,
Cure or like,
right.
the Chameleons and stuff like that. So it's yeah, I would probably get back into that if the opportunity came about.
And the prog rock, the death metal, post-punk, is there any one of those chapters of your life, we'll call for sake of discussion, that surprised you that you did that? Or is that just a progression of where you were at in your life at that point?
Well, the funny thing is I never expected to do a death metal band because when I first moved to San Francisco in 2003, it was all about I wanted the most eclectic sounding metal band
Right,
ever, and that was Saros, my band Saros. We were like this kind of hard to define metal band where it was thrashy, it was proggy, there was a lot of, melodic moments. There were some black metal moments, there were some like traditional heavy metal moments, and a little death metal too, but it wasn't like I never had set out to do a band that was going to be just purely one genre. And then it happened, and it ended up being my most successful project, surprisingly, even though we're like in some ways just a death metal band, but I think what we've done with it is different, and I think people have picked up on that, and our live shows are really, very lively, very very aggressive, violent.
right,
I mean, people get all excited about that, and they want to, you know, stage dive and
right.
take their tops off or whatever. like, you know.
For you, is there any part of the world where your music tends to resonate better, especially like in a live setting?
Well, it's funny because like my solo project seems to do really well in Europe, especially like Germany and Southern Europe. And but I haven't toured those places yet, so I don't know how it would come across live. I'm hoping to do that soon. I did tour Scandinavia, but my stuff wasn't as known there. So, some of the live shows were kind of hit or miss. Um, but and then I play locally and it's great too. So it just really depends. Depends on the bill, depends on the environment, depends on the crowd. That all factors in. And I think they could be great anywhere as long as it's the right audience, the right, the people that are aesthetically inclined to come to an event like that.
Without giving away too much, what's next for you?
After Northwest Terror Fest in Seattle,
Yes, ma'am.
so that's this Saturday, and then I have a local record release show at the Elbow Room in downtown Oakland. That's on July 20th. And then I'm gonna work on the next Vastum album with my bandmates. We already have the songs written, but we need to start jamming on them and demoing them and refining them. So that'll be next, and then I will be working on a new solo album at some point too. I have some ideas brewing that just came about and that I'm not going to give away. Um, and I also have some very exciting collaborations coming up that I've been working on for the past year, and I can't give those away just yet, but those will be announced before the end of the year. and they'll be coming out on record. So I'm excited for that.
And you as an artist, do you welcome the opportunity when you collaborate with other people where maybe it's not just all your idea, as opposed to someone coming in?
Oh yeah, you mean like most of my collaborations that are not my two main bands are guest work. You know, people that are approaching me for a specific thing. So that's really great because they already know what they want. They know
Right,
what my sound is.
right.
I just have to execute it, and my job is done. I can usually almost knock it out in like a day, a lot of these things. And it could be, you know, someone wants a trumpet solo in the middle of this doom metal song, or they
Right,
want
right.
a vocal, and or you know, I have a someone I collaborated with who wanted me to just do soundscapes on, you know, all these songs, like just kind of like I felt like a Foley artist. I was just kind of thinking, well,
Right.
how to accentuate certain parts of the recording to make them really pop out and make them more atmospheric and more, you know, deeper, darker, more melancholy, those kind of emotions.
I was
So, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. I was thinking when you're a solo artist, it's like, okay, this is gonna sound like this, and this is gonna do this, and then this is gonna do this. Then when you get into the band situation, you can't really do that. I mean, you can come in with the idea, but then they're gonna either work with it or not.
Yeah, I am very fortunate to have two bands that have never trashed any of my ideas, like not a one. And if anything, I'm my own worst critic, and I trash my ideas before I even present them to the band. So it's like I have to be at a point where my ideas are solidified, where I like them enough to want to present them. And if I
Right.
like them enough, most likely they will too. And like when I wrote three new Vastum songs late last year and earlier this year. And I swear there was one that I must have rewritten like 4 or 5 times because it was like, no, there's something missing, or this riff just isn't quite hitting the spot. And so I just, yeah, it took a lot of times to do that. And then, but now I'm at the point where I think I can show them to the band, and no, they're gonna love it, and they're gonna make it even better because I mean, we all know each other so well. Um, uh, Dan, the singer from Vastum, and I, we're like basically the two original members at this point, and we just know how to work together. We know like what kind of riffs or melodies or vibe, you know, some the vibe that we want to go for. It's We're pretty much in sync with that. So, you know, that's not always been the case in my previous bands where everyone's
Right.
on board for all of it. You know, it's been more of a compromise. And I think, you know, when you're compromising like that, I think the work suffers a little bit because it's sort of like the vision is sort of half one person, half another, but they're no one's fully realized
Right. Right.
vision. Whereas I think with my two bands, we're all able to fully realize it to the end. You know, it's not like um, you know, or like if it's usually when someone brings an idea, they know that it's not strong and they know that it needs work, and then we can come in and help them out and make it better, like maybe cut it in half or maybe make a certain part longer or something like that. So, yeah, sort of a
Social media.
long-winded answer to that.
Sorry to interrupt you. Social media.
Social media, yeah, I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and just under my name. And all of my projects have Bandcamp sites. I think Cyclic Law has my album on SoundCloud as well. And then yeah, all over the streaming apps as well.
People want to get the vinyl. Where do they go?
So if you're in America, go to Cloister Recordings. They're based out of Denver. They're really great. They put out my third album, Diminution, as well, which is out of press. Maybe it'll be repressed someday. And then if you're in Europe, Cyclic Law from France is shipping the vinyl at the moment. And yeah, depending if you're elsewhere, just check the shipping rates and see who gives you the better deal. It could be the same. I'm not sure, but yeah.